Why the hell didn't I have a camera? 2 months later, I have formed Dojo. I've made the logo. I'm a production company.
Being fired is like the end game, but actually that moment was the beginning of this journey.
That is getting fired and making some salubrious decisions which are on the edge of legality. It's a great start for the What the Fuck Happened podcast.
The irony, I guess, is that I then did literally leave the business, and
my learning from then is always have a delay on.
What the fuck happened there? Welcome to the What the Fuck Happened podcast. I'm Tom.
And I'm Sam, and we're co-hosts of this podcast.
We talk to leaders in the marketing world and lift the lid on what success truly is.
It is all about that moment of chaos that breeds success.
With every episode, we'll be speaking to new guests, diving into the what the fuck happened moments that shaped them.
And we're interested in the fine, gritty details. No story is a straight line, no journey is a straight line, and the squiggle is something we're going to ask every guest to draw out at the end.
Tom, let's start with you. Before Dojo, what the hell were you doing? And what is the one what the fuck moment that set you on the path to where you are now?
The one that more people know about, sort of led to Dojo in part, is the getting fired by 90 seconds. I was already working for a video technology business in a sort of sales and account management role. The company was growing, they got investment, there was new management, and lots of things changed. Some of it was good, some of it was bad.
There was a culture clash.
There was
There
definitely a culture clash. I did not get on with my new manager. I knew that I was kind of being phased out of the business. Targets were being increased month to month. And part of the reason the business was doing that is because they were trying to sort of future-proof themselves, I guess. They had, it was a sensible decision, thinking about it now, but they had a lot of sort of account managers who had very close relationships with clients. And they wanted to make sure that if individuals left the business, those clients didn't leave with them. And that led to a few challenges, which led to a big day in the office where I walked out or got fired first and then walked out and then
you quit.
And then I quit. The irony, I guess, is that I then did literally leave the business and take a client.
Yeah. So that's actually more their what the fuck happened moment, isn't it? They're like, what the happened?
Yeah, I mean, I probably, but I think, for me, when I look back at career specifically within this kind of video space, that was pivotal. It was, because when you are working for another business and you're in a career, being fired is kind of supposed to be the end. It's like the end game. It's kind of like the worst possible thing that can happen. But actually, that moment was the beginning of this journey.
And it's a great start for the What the Fuck Happened podcast, because that is getting fired and making some salubrious decisions which are on the edge of legality. And that's what this podcast is all about. A lot of people would try and cover that up, but our relationship essentially started with you on the day you got fired, coming to me and say, I've got a client and I can't work with them. So do you want to work with them and I can get involved type thing? That was essentially it, wasn't it? And, the rest is history.
That is literally the point of the podcast. I think it's just uncovering that. When people are like, how did you start the business, or how did you meet? How did things start? They kind of expect this sort of structured, well thought out, plan process, but actually it was the complete opposite.
It wasn't squeaky clean. It certainly wasn't squeaky clean.
It wasn't clean. And I don't think it's something that you could replicate, and nor would I advise anybody to try and replicate. But, it's worked out.
Here we are. And to be fair, we should clarify, that client said, I don't want to work with the agency you work for. I want to work with you. So it wasn't like you were being sort of snaky. You knew you had the relationship there, and they didn't have a, loyalty to the agency you're working for. They had a loyalty to you.
No, exactly.
I think that's why that kind of thing isn't, there are certain contracts which say certain things, but there's also just a relationship.
Yeah, when I left the business, I obviously had a sort of, a clause that prevented me from directly reaching out to clients, but there's no such clause to prevent a client reaching out to somebody that they want to work with. So yeah, exactly. I think, that is what happened. What then happened afterwards though became, quite hilarious. I obviously reached out to you. We talked about the opportunity, the client, and spent many weeks going back and forth with that contract.
Co-pitched it from our basement.
I think I'll hand over to you to maybe talk about what the fuck happened on that with that particular part of the story.
Well, yeah, that wasn't actually my what the fuck happened moments, but as you say, that there are lots of them that came to mind. That was just a my bad moment. Like, you put your hands up and say, my bad, you've got gardening leave, and I've sent a contract with your name on it to your boss who fired you before your gardening leave is up, to your old email, essentially, which was getting forwarded to her. So yeah, that was a what the fuck moment, I imagine, for you. Just like, what the fuck have you done? It was, and actually I had to come to you and say, what the fuck have I done? Because I realized straight away, that's not your personal email, that's your work email, and almost certainly that's going to be thrown up the ladder. It was touch and go whether we actually pursued it after that, because we didn't really know what the legalities were.
No.
But at the end of the day, the advice we got was, you were not doing anything wrong because you haven't solicited this business. They have come to you and said, do you know anyone who can action this campaign, because we've lost faith in the current supplier. And I was someone who could action that campaign. So actually it was all fine, but there were legal letters banded about. We talk about what the fuck happened leading to a learning, like learning from failure. My learning from then is always have a delay on email send.
Always have a delay.
Every email I send has a 30-second delay, so I can think, what the fuck have I just sent here? Yeah. And then I've got 30 seconds to retract it. And if I had it back then
I mean, people always say, check the attachment. That's the classic one for getting to attach a file, isn't it? But also just make sure you're sending it to the right person in the first place is a good lesson.
But it's boring, actually, because if you think about it, there's a chance that so many less what the fuck happened moments will happen because of AI. Like, now AI basically picks up, you've used the word attached, and says, have you forgotten to attach the file? And that's a bit of a shame, really, because you're going to have far less fuck ups in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I think that's a shame for everyone.
Yeah. It's one less email as well as in the conversation, because if you send an email without an attachment, you're going to get a response from the person saying, where's the attachment? So maybe that should be something we put in our sales outreach.
Bring back fuck ups.
Bring back failed attachments. What is your backstory, and what was the turning point that changed everything for you?
I wasn't in video production early on, and I actually went into work for an environmental NGO. They were doing Rio Plus 20, which was the Earth Summit out there. And I managed to convince them I'd be a useful pair of hands because I wouldn't be that busy like all the other people who had important jobs. So I managed to go out to Rio in 2012. And then it's a long-winded story, but I ended up managing to take a couple of months off and finding a friend in Rio de Janeiro and pitching to go into the Amazon basin. My dad had been there making a documentary 40 years previously. I went into the Amazon basin having met this anthropologist and got accreditation from the FUNAI. And we were going to try and see if this solar kiosk idea would work. Talking about the what the fuck happened moment, I think when I came back from that, we wrote this report and pitched it to a few charities to see if we could set up these solar kiosks, because it was providing light for education and cooking within these sort of communities. And I just suddenly had this click in my head of, why the hell didn't I have a camera? I didn't have a good camera, and my dad had been in there 40 years before making films about this thing, and I basically have like 3 photos from the whole thing.
Had you thought about film at all before that moment?
I'd never.
Even though your dad was in
I'd always been like, don't want to go down the same route. I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
But that was the click moment of like, bollocks to this 40-page report that no one's going to read. Imagine the impact of being able to film that and tell this story of the solar kiosks and the need of the local community. Now, to be fair, it wasn't ever going to work anyway because we had to prove they had a need for it. And when we asked them what they'd use the energy for, they said we'd put on a big screen in the middle of the village so we could watch football. so they didn't really want, it's sort of Western people come in and say, yo, you must want, light for education at night and a fridge for medicine. And they're like, no, we want a big ass TV to watch football. That was the spark of the storytelling thing.
Yeah.
I think I've always been very creative, and in my spare time I was always making videos and stuff at people's weddings and little montages and whatever. But as a career, that was a moment of just thinking, why have I not thought of this medium for storytelling rather than, report building and all that sort of guff.
Is that a what the fuck moment in hindsight, or do you think it was did it feel like a what the fuck? Well, maybe not what the fuck, but it was a moment at the time. Is that how you felt then? Or
I think it was a retrospective, what the fuck was I doing not capturing that, more of that on camera.
Yeah.
So it's the most sort of visually different and incredible place I've been, and I've got very, very, very little evidence of it.
Did it even happen?
Well, who knows? But yeah, I mean, that's a sort of looking back into the sort of backstory of why you think you ended up getting to where you are. And that sort of idea, I think a lot of the idea of the What the Fuck Happened podcast is that sliding doors moment. If you didn't have this thing happen and this one thought, then everything would have taken a completely different path potentially.
What's that? Butterfly?
Yeah, butterfly effect. Do you have a pivotal decision you think you've made that's shaped your career path?
It's hard to put it on one particular thing, but there is one moment that I'll talk about, which sort of happened before I'd ever earned a pound from anyone, excluding landscaping jobs as a kid at the weekend.
Good business, that.
It was a very good business. I think it will be a really good business in the future as well with AI. But anyway, that's another conversation. There's every single year in London, there's a big conference called the World Travel Market, which we've even talked about, and we've been to as Dojo Films. When I left school, I had a gap year. Then I went to SAE to film school, came out of film school, and I was like, I need to do something. And I didn't want to work for anyone. I wasn't interested in going into movies, which is what a lot of the other people had done at the film school. I got myself a Sony Z1.
Good camera.
Final Cut Pro. And then I was like, I want to go to Africa. So, which the seed had been planted by an earlier trip. And
had you been before?
I'd been in my gap year to Zimbabwe with a friend who'd organised the whole thing. And when we were there was an ITV crew doing a shoot, or like a wildlife documentary, which had which had planted the seed to go to film school. But the pivotal moment, I think, is when I'd left and I was trying to work out what do I do, somebody suggested, why don't you just go to this World Travel Market? Because everybody from all over the world, hospitality-wise, is going to be there. Hotels, lodges, tourism boards. Just go. And I remember going and not really knowing what I was going to do. I hadn't had any job before that, so I had no experience. So I just remember walking into this enormous building. There was a whole hall that was just for Africa. And I went in and I remember there being Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and there were tiny little desks with one representative of their game lodge. And they're there to sell their lodge to another travel booker or something in the UK. And I just went around, and I remember initially walking up to them and coming up with excuses why not to speak to them, because I was petrified of just talking. And eventually someone who looked super innocent and chilled and, nice and approachable became available. And I went and sat next to them, and it was this person from, I can't remember their name, unfortunately, but they were representing Mapula Lodge, which is a game lodge in the Okavango Delta. And I went and sat down, and I can't remember anything I said, but I basically pitched, I have a camera and a laptop. If you can cover the costs of me getting to you and being on your lodge, I'll make you a video which you can use to sell the business. That video was horrific. I found it about 5 or 6 years ago, and I did the whole voiceover in a David Attenborough accent. The editing is really bad. I don't think I didn't know how to set white balance or anything. But the point is, looking back at that moment, it was that for whatever reason, just had that moment of like courage where I was able to cross that line of being petrified and scared and just stepping into the complete unknown. So I think for me, that was the very first time I did anything that was related to sort of sales, I guess, or video. And that kind of started me on my journey, I think.
I wish I had it on me because we got sent that David Attenborough impression and played it at your wedding.
You did, yeah. It was.
Can you do a little soundbite of your David Attenborough impression now?
Today on the What the Fuck Happened podcast, I, David Attenborough, something like that.
Oh, what the fuck happens to David Attenborough?
What is your what the fuck moment that redefined how you think and approach everything?
I've just finished a job and gone on holiday and come back and sort of started interviewing for new TV jobs. And I went to a shocking one with this Geordie girl from Geordie Shore who was going to get two broken up couples and get them to have an argument in front of camera. And I was thinking, this is just the pits. And I thought, you know, maybe this isn't for me unless I can start getting into other parts of TV. You know, an Attenborough show would be nice, for example. Something slightly more highbrow. My what the fuck moment was this moment where I was just at a party and there was a guy who was like chatting to me about how he's a photographer. He was going on this shoot on Hayling Island.
Where's that?
Near Portsmouth.
Okay.
And he was like, oh, we need someone to do video though, like behind the scenes video.
Yeah.
Because that's getting more and more important for a lot of these brand shoots. And I was like, what's the brand? He's like, oh, it's someone from Made in Chelsea has made a bikini brand. And I was like, of course they have. But he was like, we need a behind the scenes videographer. I was like, I'm a behind the scenes videographer.
I've got a camera.
I'd touched the camera a few times being assistant producer in TV. So
was this your own kit? Or you just,
No. I didn't have any kit. I didn't have anything. Okay. So I was like, I do that. And he was like, oh, well, you got all the kit. I was like, yeah, sure I do. And then with a bit of a hangover the next day, I had to go to the camera shop. One of my parents' friends runs a London Camera Exchange on the Strand.
Yeah.
So I went in there. I was like, what camera can you give me? Because I need to. He was like 5 a.m. Monday morning. So this is a Sunday trying to get a camera and learn how to use it. And then 5 a.m. on Monday morning, we got in a minibus down to Hayling Island to shoot this bikini campaign. And then suddenly I was obviously got the 5D3, the Canon 5D3, and spent the day sort of get on a rib going around boats filming girls in bikinis. And I thought, freelance life isn't so bad. So yeah, that was certainly a pivotal moment of like the freedom of suddenly being the cameraman, the editor, the decision maker, the storyteller, what angle. There's no boss telling you what to do. There's no sort of rubbish, you know, editor director combo of people with different thoughts. Like when you go into that one-man band freelance world, you're like, oh, I get to decide everything. Yeah. Actually, they were really, really happy with the end result. I mean, I'm looking back at it very unhappy with the end result, but
it's amazing how quickly that happened though, for like in 48 hours.
Yeah, 48 hours.
From not being that person to suddenly being that person and having done the job.
2 months later, I have formed Dojo. I've made the logo. I'm a production company.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Obviously, a lot of production companies are one person trying to look a bit bigger than they are.
Yeah.
Luckily, that's not what we are anymore. But that's where sort of Dojo started, really. So that's definitely my what the fuck happened moment. I think a lot of the what the fuck happened moments, at the time, you're just rolling with it. You're like, yeah, this is all normal. I've bought a camera and I'm going and filming this thing and I'm faking it till I make it.
Yeah.
But when you look back at it.
I mean, if you were to go back to that exact moment and then tell yourself then that decision right then was literally about to lead you on this path where a month later you're a business. What, I mean, would you have believed it?
Well, to be honest, I don't think I'd advise myself against anything else.
Yeah.
So there's no like retrospective, what should I have done? It's just like, I'm glad I was in a moment where I was just like a bit fed up with what I was doing.
Yeah.
And therefore was willing to take a bit of a punt. Something else.
My what the fuck moment was a very long moment about 2.5 years.
Yeah, you're stretching the parameters of what people think of as a moment.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, a moment in the grand scheme of time. I studied business studies and economics, and then I decided I didn't want to do that. Then I went to film school and didn't want to go into film. Then I tried to launch my own version of a production company. And after, I think I launched that in like 2007 or something until 2010, Wildlife Media. And that, like, after 3 years, I was done with that. And then I think the moment in time that really changed how I think and went about things was I got a job in recruitment. When I look back at it, I think I placed quite a lot of negativity on it to some extent. It's being a recruiter is a pretty tough gig. You don't get a lot of, pats on the back. People don't, it's not a role that people necessarily aspire to or are proud of talking about. But I do think it's a very good, it's a good job and it's a tough job. And I think it's the job that actually sort of shapes me, because prior to that, I was just doing what Tom Voller wanted to do. And what Tom Voller wanted to do quite often was not a fucking lot. I was kind of making all sorts of ridiculous decisions and just, doing what I could. I think the funny thing about it now is I think I might have had a predisposition to what we're now doing, because I was working for a recruitment company that specialized in sourcing finance investment individuals for private equity firms. And so my job was to basically go out every single day and go into some sort of office of a PE firm and pitch to a portfolio manager or a manager and say, I've got the right person to join your team and help you grow or whatever. But a lot of that job was come into the office 8 o'clock in the morning, not allowed to sit on your chair until you've like dialed the phone 90 times and you had to like book a meeting in with a client and then you were allowed to sit down. I'm not sure those tactics would be, allowed anymore. What I learned off the back of that was the ability to pick up the phone, the ability to go out and pitch, handling rejection, which I think when you then go into business, if you have an idea or a creative as well, it's the same for creative directors. You've got an idea, you have to be able to deal with rejection. And if you can build the muscle memory of like being rejected to over and over and over again, it then doesn't stop you from doing it. Whereas I think if you were only to do, if you have one idea and you pitch it and someone says they don't like it, you can let that get you down. So I think that period of time actually really helped set me up for success now, basically, even though I didn't necessarily like the experience at the time.
I think that's good, actually. And I think you sort of do yourself a disservice as to how good you were at that job, because I met quite a few of your colleagues who their line was always between the hours of 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. Tom is the best recruiter that anyone's ever seen. And he does more business than everyone else who's working twice the amount of hours. But he gets in late and he leaves early. But he's still booking way more jobs than anyone else. So you're obviously very good at it, even if you didn't particularly like it or fully apply yourself to it the whole time. But I did notice that in you when one of my biggest sort of blind spots, I guess, was this sort of perfectionist's hate of failure thing I have, where I just need everything to be perfect and it needs to be as good as it can ever be and nothing's ever actually finished. Whereas with you, when we went to events and stuff, you were immediately just going up to people and saying, do you want this thing? We know you want it, don't you? And I was like, whoa, this guy's pretty bold. And that must have come out of your recruiter days where you're just forced to just try people out until you find the right person.
That's the whole yin yang thing, because equally, in the job that we're in now, I can go and do the sell, but then we actually have to follow through and deliver the service. And that's obviously, it's not the only thing that you do, and nor is sales the only thing I do, but then having that kind of that other side of like, okay, but we need to make sure that what we then follow up with is good and worthy.
What was your perspective? Did you, from that moment when you thought, oh, Sam runs a video production company, did you always think, that would be sort of plain sailing? How did you think we sort of came together in that moment?
I think the fact that after being fired and this opportunity came about from a client of mine who called and said, can you put something together? I think it was, if it wasn't the first thought that came to my head, it was very close to being the first thought, and that was to just reach out to you. I mean, we were friends at the time, still are. Apparently, for the sake of the podcast. No, but we obviously we knew each other, and also we had actually worked with each other, not necessarily in the same dynamic that we do now, but I had been in I had accounts at my previous role, and you were a freelancer and you had received work from the company. So it wasn't sort of completely out of the realms of normality to sort of think about that. But from my side, at least, I don't think there was any room for like doubt or, questioning whether it was the right thing. It was almost not in a negative or disrespectful way, but it was, for me at that time, it was kind of, this has to happen. I had no job. I'd just been fired and I still had rent to pay. So it was more a case, for me, it was a case of like, this needs to happen. And I guess, I've since, not at the time, but, since heard countless people, entrepreneurs talk about, where does success come from or how did you make it happen? And I think often you do hear of people sort of saying it had to happen. There's that kind of underlying driving force. I think maybe thinking back at some of the challenges that we faced, where there were quite a number of points where we could have gone, not sure this is a great idea. It was kind of like, just fucking, shoot that down immediately because it's got to happen sort of vibe. But equally, as I think it's worth pointing out that throughout the whole time, because you were a friend, there's trust. And I think that's really important. We were told at the time, and since, going into business with a friend is a tough thing to do. And it does have its challenges, but I would actually strongly argue the other way around as well, right? Which is, if you're going to go into a business with somebody that you don't know, that's a fucking huge decision to make, because going into a business is, you're kind of sort of like unofficially wedded to that other person.
I agree. I think business is a marriage, no matter how you look at it, especially if you're in a sort of partnership, like co-founders. People quite often say it works when it's sort of an Indian style marriage where it's sort of blind marriage of partners and you just sort of make things work. But I agree. I think the model of knowing the person, and even if that slightly changes the friendship, at least the business partnership starts from a place of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think we were always quite honest about each other, that we sort of quite quickly realized we had complementary personalities, very clashing personalities in a lot of ways, but complementary in the end result.
Yeah.
Me being sort of perfectionist, risk averse, you being like, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
Meeting in the middle means you get stuff done, but it's better than not perfect, sort of.
Yeah.
And I think we realized that worked quite well. And I think quite a lot of that happened through conversations that may not have happened if we were a bit, I don't know him too well, I can't say this, I can't say that. We probably had some quite honest discussions early on. I remember being in Buffalo Bills in Soho, and we went there and we had a sort of, I don't know what time it was like a breakfast brunchy type time.
Oh yeah.
And you were writing down all the numbers and you're like, mate, this is awesome. And we were crunching the numbers and I was getting more and more sketched out. It's like, these numbers do not make sense. Like the margin is like 11%. And I was like, that's businesses that run an 11% margin. But obviously you'd come from an agency who were just like volume, and they were taking this like tech approach to business, which is like, just getting customers at cost, bringing customers. Margins can be quite small. But they're just getting on huge amounts of clients.
Yeah.
They're growing like a tech company, right? Where I was used to things being priced properly and being okay, you like, you add 40% and this is how you bring on freelancers and stuff. And I was just sweating at the collar being like, how the hell is this going to work?
I find that interesting you brought that up, because that particular project was, if what you were doing was on the right side and that was all the way on the left, same thing with the personality thing. What's ended up happening is gradually we moved away from that style, and I've actually probably landed somewhere that is more in the middle of the experience and background I had and the experience and background you had, or at least, the approach to the service and the product that we offer.
And it's funny talking about that, because I think we actually got out the other day. We sent it to Emily, who we've been working with in our marketing efforts, and we sent her this animation we did in it's basically the first thing we did as a bit of marketing for ourselves. And it was this sort of, because Dojo has, Japanese connotations, Japanese word, the place of the way, we decided to make this sort of Japanese calligraphy style animation. The message behind that was exactly what you're saying. There is this new video tech global creator network, thousands of people to choose from to make your content, and just come to us and we'll do all of your stuff, and it's all brand consistent. That's the concept, but it's this the Uber of video production thing. And then there's what I was doing, which was independent boutique video production. It's been done a lot. It's a person who has some contacts and he just comes and makes your film for you and then asks about the next project. And I think what we was saying is we want to sit in the middle of that and pay people properly and make sure everyone's happy and bring on the best people.
Yeah.
Because the best people do get paid properly.
Yeah.
But we want to do that
it
for customers who want to use up for all of their video content, because that means they get consistency, and we know how to create their brand in their video marketing efforts, and everything can be built by this one company, but by creators in different markets and in different skill sets, animation, live action, but bring it all together.
What was there a moment of realization for you that, this might work? Or when did that happen? Or has it not yet happened?
I think that's just happened right now. Suddenly talking about it makes me feel like this could work. No, I think, to be honest, our first SaaS client, we work with Iron Man and we still do. And they're a sort of legacy client. We love working with them. We do some really, really cool stuff. And we do their event videos for their races across Europe, and we also do brand videos, and we shot documentary in South Africa. But we started working with Complementary, and they were our first sort of tech client. There was something that clicked in at that point in terms of this model we have of using crew around the world and selecting the right people for the right job, but being that one point of contact for a client really just seemed to make sense when we started working with them and getting different briefs in different parts of their business and meeting different people in the marketing team. And suddenly being like, okay, this is really where it's going to work, this model.
Yeah. I think we've got a lot to be grateful for from that team. We were always, the fact that they continue to come back to us proves that we were able to deliver. But they were the first customer that gave us the opportunity on a number of, obviously you had done plenty of projects beforehand. It wasn't like we had no social proof, but certainly like animation and, explainers and demos and getting really stuck into a lot of what SaaS needs.
So shout out to Zoe,
Caitlin, Christine, Trevor. Yeah.
Main man. So that was a really good time. And it was just the breadth of different video types we were doing. And even if obviously COVID happened and we thought that may curtail things, but after a bit of time, they were coming back saying, we're doing our annual event in a virtual space and we want to create some recorded assets. And it was my first chance I was obsessed with Harry Mack, who's a freestyle rapper. Yeah. And I was like, when am I ever in this sort of reasonably sort of digital marketing world? When am I ever going to have the chance to work with someone like that? And then I just pitched it to them. You're like, why don't you just pitch it to them? And I said, you should get Harry Mack to come on and MC your sessions.
Yeah.
And they got him on.
I know.
And I was just like there, or just chatting to Harry Mack.
I was on some of those calls with you, those virtual calls. I think you still have a recording of one of
I'm
them.
very rarely a fangirl for anything, but I was fangirling the hell out of Harry Mack.
And he's continued to get bigger. Maybe we should repurpose that content.
Well, this is our chance to shout out to him and say,
cheers, Harry Mack. We should get him on this as well. That'd be fun.
I think that was a moment where things were clicking for us as a partnership.
Yeah.
And then I guess also the next stage of it not just being us, but us wanting to scale a business that did what we wanted to do. I think bringing Sophie on, our head of production, was a real pivotal moment of us being able to go to someone, pitch them the idea of what we are doing, and for them to be interested.
Yeah, get people bought into our belief or their belief.
Bought into our belief. Yeah, that what we're doing.
I mean, it wasn't a written down vision, but it was a vision.
We actually realised there's a very strong moment that we started becoming what we are now, and we actually have a really well defined set of like services and offerings, and the business that we built are for a very specific type of person, but we didn't actually know why until we looked back at it not so long ago. And realized it was this moment in New York.
And it was December 2019. We had the opportunity to pitch to the in-house portfolio marketing team at Insight Partners, who I believe are the largest investor into tech companies in the world.
We mentioned Complementary earlier. Complementary are one of over 200 of these portfolio companies. So the opportunity that made us Complementary, there were more than 200 more of those opportunities.
It was a big opportunity, very big. You can frame it as a failed pitch, but equally you can kind of frame it as the making of us. I guess that's the point. But we basically went in, and it's almost cringe thinking about it. I mean, I remember I was sort of dressed as I normally am, like t-shirt and jeans, but then got to the airport. I was like, oh no, we're going to like an office block in New York. So I'll buy some smart-ish shoes. And, looking at the photos of us, we looked like we didn't quite fit in, I don't think. But anyway, I remember we went up, we were in that room, 60th floor or whatever it was, New York City, skyline behind us, pitching to like powerhouses. And we had this Japanese themed animation with which
I got really into the dynamics or the way the Prezi. So it wasn't what I didn't want to do was have a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So I hate PowerPoints. So I was like, I found this thing called Prezi, which like zoomed in and out, and it was like it moved around, and you could start seeing the whole pitch, and then you zoomed into the beginning, and it had arrows that took you around.
Yeah.
And I spent so long with you designing this thing and being like, oh, how should it move? And we lost sight of the fact that actually a lot of what a pitch is like, what do you need? Let's ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Like that is really the big fuck up.
I think, exactly. I would say like we took them on this kind of amazing, immersive visual journey of the business that, let's be honest, like, we weren't that business.
We were pitching
what we are now. And I think the key thing is that we pitched all of that, but there was no substance to it. There was no social proof, like to your point, it was all like we're moving around and it looks all nice, but like who are these people?
And we now work with a sort of an action coach who is helping us stay accountable and helping us with our mindset as founders, right? And it's the most valuable thing we've done recently is working with James. And he said in our session, literally yesterday, the worst form of selling or marketing or whatever it is, when you're talking to a person and telling them, is like, this is us.
Yeah.
Not like,
who are you?
Oh, who are you?
Yeah.
This is us. And that whole pitch, 90 minutes, 90 minutes of this is us. And
also it wasn't us.
She started sending emails.
Yeah,
didn't she?
I know,
she started not even pretending to look at our presentation.
No.
By the end, she was sending emails and just completely uninterested.
The positive from it though is that we had that opportunity, which must be testament to something to have even had it. But what I find really interesting is, I was literally in New York, literally just this weekend, and I went to the bottom of that building, and to be there like 6 years later and go, everything that we pitched in that meeting is literally now what we've become. So we did not sit down and make that prezi and go, this is the vision for Dojo Films necessarily. But weirdly, we have kind of we have become the very thing that we pitched to them. If we had the opportunity now to go in there, who knows what would happen.
I think the other thing would be, we would make sure they needed it.
That's true. We'd probably ask them some questions as well. Like you say, do you need a video production company?
What we do now is, we know about qualification, and we know about, the need is the priority, and then the fact that we have it comes next.
Yeah.
And I think we realized there was that need.
Yeah.
But we needed to go through the motions of asking and proving, and the selling process being, a conversation.
Yeah.
And a relationship, rather than this all bells and whistles.
Yeah.
This is what we are, even though we're not actually it.
For the record, I think, in the pitch, we might not have had asked as many questions as we should have done, but we obviously had contacts with their UK team, and both prior to that meeting and then afterwards, I think what we ended up doing is asking more questions and understanding that particular sector, and recognizing that there are a lot of these businesses who are on this, exceptionally fast upward trajectory, and they have a lot of challenges and problems that they need to, resolve. Video is a big thing for these businesses, and having a business that can help you grow, help you create content in regions where you don't have a physical presence on the ground, understanding that, a lot of these SaaS brands, they like rebrand every single year. The product keeps changing. They keep adding features and services and chopping and changing, and they've got customers popping up left, right, and center that they need to communicate to in nuanced languages and so on. So I think there was a lot of learnings from that we probably have now implemented as well, that, really makes us a properly good fit for these B2B SaaS firms.
I think we realized, what do SaaS brands need?
Yeah.
They need, when it comes to visual storytelling, video marketing, they need creativity, they need consistency. They quite often need a multi-regional production solution.
Yeah.
Because they are, by their very nature, able to sell their product globally.
Yeah.
And they need to tell their story in different markets. That storytelling is the other bit. A lot of production companies, it's fine when you work with a luxury brand and you're just like, make it look nice and make it ambiguous. That's the sell. That's easy. Like, any production company who's good at making stuff can do that. When it comes to SaaS brands, the storytelling is different, and it needs a certain approach, and it needs people to come in and tell you, this is how you want to tell your story, and this is all of the information you need to take out.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of our work is taking out case studies and taking out language that just doesn't fit a video format.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've learned, is the storytelling is different, but it's far closer than it quite often is.
We've got to create a good story, but it's understanding what they do and what they're offering. As you say, it's kind of, if Apple release a new iPhone, I can get my iPhone and call LeBron James and get him to jump up and down holding an iPhone, and people will buy the product. But with SaaS, if you went and got, Roger Federer and gave him quantum metric and just said, look at it and be in a video for 90 seconds, no one's going to know what that even is. So there's a whole there's an educational piece there. And then there's like visualizing essentially a load of stuff that isn't visual.
One of the things we sort of set it up for is it's a discussion of a journey and the pivotal moments within that journey. The nice theme that sets up for us is the fact we also have this squiggle, which is part of our brand identity, right? We call it the squiggle. It's a sort of...
I'm wearing it.
It's a bend. You are wearing it. It's a bendy shape. That is the main squiggle, but we've actually got loads of squiggles. There are infinite squiggles, right? For me, the squiggle is the journey of storytelling.
Yeah.
And I think what's become very apparent, like chatting to each other through this first episode of the What the Fuck Happened podcast, is we have so many random pivots and movements and turns in our journey. And they're quite often, what the fuck happened there? And you're looking back at them and you realize that was a good squiggle, and that was a bad squiggle.
Yeah. No journey is the same, and you might have a plan to go from A to B, but as you say, that's just never how it works. There's always something that happens. There's a moment, a what the fuck happened moment. You pivot, you adapt, you change, you adopt. I mean, it would be interesting if we actually drew a squiggle of the life, like the life of Dojo Films. One of the things I forget is, we launched a business and 2 months later COVID happened. So that's a big fucking downward moment, wasn't it? And then so there's all these, and then we pivoted and changed. So yeah, I think the squiggle is cool. It's different. It's unique. I think it expresses creativity as well.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So I've got two. Again, I like breaking the parameters. No, one of them is we haven't spoken to him in a while. Martin Banbury, who has been or had been advising, both you and I on various aspects of the business. He's built an advertising agency from scratch before, and sold and whatever. So reaching out, asking for advice. One thing I remember him saying that always stuck was on so many things that we asked was he'd just turn around to us and look at us and stay silent. And then he would just be like, just trust your gut. Like, you already know a lot of the answers yourselves. One other piece of advice, we've done something specific with the advice afterwards, was Adam Holmes. When we last saw him, he sort of recommended that we really think about trying to stand for something, trying to stand out and be niche. More specifically, I think he advised us to really get clear on what is our North Star. Where are we trying to aim to? And I think he described it as being this like tiny little moon dot in the distance. The point is you never really get there, but it's just this sort of guiding, well, it's the North Star. That's what it's for, right? As a piece of advice, we kind of have sort of implemented that to some extent across the business. And I think the key learning from that is it's now allowed us to communicate a direction, a belief. And I think as we now go about building a team and you want other people to come on board, to the whole point of the squiggle, we don't really know how we're going to get there, but that is where we're aiming. That's where we're roughly headed to. So I think, for me, that was that. What about you?
Don't worry, be happy. Bobby McFerrin.
Oh, is that not Bob Marley?
No. That's Bobby McFerrin. It's a...
Yeah. If you go back to your what the fuck moment, what advice would you give to yourself?
Well, my what the fuck moment was actually quite positive. It was a good what the fuck. That was great. So just yes. Do it. Yeah, just you've done it. Yeah, keep going.
Well done.
Don't go back. Go forward.
Enjoy the ride.
How about you?
I don't think I would have done anything differently, but maybe just mentally, I think where I was at in the past in some of these situations is I didn't, again, it relates back to the journey. Actually it's the opposite. I didn't know where I was trying to get to. So I think the advice I would have said to myself back then is just simply to don't worry, don't worry. Your experiences lead you somewhere. Like they will amount to something. They will count for something.
To finish this sentence, success is
simple. Take the first step. I think if you take the first step, you're ahead of 99% of your perceived competition straight away. And then you just go with the flow. Or my favorite company slogan, Nike, just do it. Success is
a state of mind. The parameters of success are set. This is like a tongue twister. The parameters of success are set by the person who sets the set.
By Severus Snape.
The parameters of success are set by the person who's trying to achieve it, right?
Yes, so they're different.
If you think you have been successful, then that is success.
Then you are successful.
Whatever anyone else thinks doesn't really matter.
Thank you for listening to the What the Fuck Happened podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to listen to more, subscribe to our channel. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. What the fuck happened there?